Hello, welcome to Subjective Insights. I think the demographic that this video is kind of addressed to is the normal everyday man in the street who hasn't really looked much into economics, hasn't thought too deeply, or looked that much into questions like where does money come from. And what I'm going to try and describe here is the economic model that he has implicitly within his mind when he talks about people on benefits and stuff like that. So this is not a sophisticated economic model I'm going to be putting forwards. And of course, the economics taught in universities, that anybody that does any level of research into economics, that they will be able to come up with answers to where money comes from. And they'll acknowledge that, like I say, that there is a source of money, and the person that is in control of that source can print money out of thin air, because it's paper, you look at it, and it's just numbers on a screen. Anyway, so in their minds, the economy is separated into four groups. What you have the government, households, firms, and banks. Okay, and the way they think that the government gets its money to spend is from taxing households and firms, right? And banks, yeah. So they believe that the money that the government spends is given to the government by the other three groups. The households, the money they use to spend, is given to them in wages from the firms and in benefits and stuff from the government. And also, if you have a savings account, you get an interest rate on that. That's supposedly coming from the bank lending out your money and giving you part of the interest that it gets. So the households then get their money from the government, the firms and the banks, right? And that's what they used to spend. The firms, they believe that the firms get their money that they used to spend from the banks lending it to them, from the sale that they make to the household and the state, and in subsidies from the government and stuff like that. And then the banks, that they believe that the banks get their money that they used to lend out, that they used to spend in that way, from the households, the firms and the state in when they pay back debts. If you look at this, quite rapidly, a question should come to your mind, is where is the money coming from? Because the assumption is that each of those four entities, is spending out of the money it earns that is the spending of the other groups. So it kind of ignores the source of money. Yeah. So one of these four statements then has to be false, or at least one of these four statements. One, that government spends out of taxation, right? Uses tax in order to spend. That's one assumption within that model. Second, that households need wages in order to spend. Third, that firms rely upon sales to pay off debt and in order to spend. Or that banks rely upon deposits in order to lend out. Because if these are the only four entities within the economy, where's the money coming from? And we know that there's been an ever-increasing supply of money. That's what the debt manifests. You can't lend out trillions and trillions of pounds if there is no source of money, when 10 years ago there was only £1 billion in the economy. It's impossible. Where does that extra stuff come from? So one of those four statements has to be false. Either it's false that government doesn't use taxation for revenue, or it's false that households don't use wages for spending, or it's false that firms don't use sales for profits, or it's false that banks don't use deposits for lending. That the banks use deposits for lending. Goodbye! And this is also what I mean. I don't like hearsay thinking. So here I'm trying to use a form of argumentation where the way you would verify what I'm saying, the means you would use to find out whether what I'm saying is true or false are immediately available to you. You could just look at that. It's like I say to, if I say to you 2 + 2 = 5, you can look at that if you know what 2 means and plus means and equals means and say that it's clearly wrong. You can validate that in yourself. So you can clearly look there. If all 4 entities within an economy all claim to only be spending money they get from one of the other entities, and none of those entities produces money out of thin air, then where does the extra money come from? That is a question that makes sense given that kind of thinking, right? You can't deny that. So it's not hearsay. What would be hearsay is where you would try and say that this model fits to reality, and then instead of relying upon your own ability to look at reality and compare it to that model, you rely upon other people's, like they wear white coats quite often, the scientists and stuff, to do that verification procedure for you. Anyway, goodbye.